What I have in my hand right now may look like nothing, but as soon as you put light on it, these are actual Hollywood films that have been preserved in resin. I have Jesse and Michelle here today, the creators and the people behind this magic, and we're going to be learning a little bit more about film preservation.
You crazy son of a bitch, you're dead.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
He's looking at you, kid.
Right here.
I can almost reach it, Dad.
Indiana.
Let it go.
Hi guys, I'm Michelle. I do set dressing in the industry.
So we met on a film set in Florida, because you're in Florida, right?
Yeah, I'm in St. Augustine. Yeah, and you guys met in St. Pete?
Yeah, absolutely. And it turned out we are from the same hometown in upstate New York. By the way, the same hometown that all these awesome film strips that we're doing, they come out of our hometown, so Rochester, New York. So yeah, we met there. I was doing gig work, shooting something, and we just kind of met and just never looked back.
That's so cool. So what exactly are these reels? Like, what are these prints? Explain to people who just don't even understand what they are.
To keep it as straightforward as we can, these are theater film prints. So let's just take the world we live in now and put that on pause, and let's just kind of get everyone to rewind back. Not even that far. We're talking like maybe between 10 and 15 years ago. Whenever you went to a movie theater, I'm not talking like a boutique theater, like the type of stuff that Quentin owns or whatever. I'm talking about AMC's, Cinemarks, what have you. You watch these movies on the big screen, right? You're talking about these really large seats, stadium style seating. That image that you were watching is what we are preserving. And the size of this film is still to this day is just, it's incredible, because you're talking about like basically it's like an inch by a half inch of image, but you put enough light behind it and you put an optic behind it and you put it on something that's kind of opaque enough, all of a sudden you have this massive image. And then you got to get it running through this machine. Got to get it running through, sorry, we got a cat here. You got to get it running through the machine kind of fast. And you got to get 24 of those pictures through that small gate so enough light can hit that screen to fool your eye.
We can have the catwalker on. It's fun.
Intermission. End of intermission. And you got to get this stuff going fast enough to basically fool your eye. I mean, even to this day, like, the way digital works is it's essentially pulsing faster than your brain can comprehend, and then you basically dismiss it and it looks like it's moving. Same thing was happening, but it was happening in an analog world. So long story short, these are film strips that came from movie theaters.
And so correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes there's two reels, right? Because I know back in the day, there was like an art to actually projecting these, and they would have to time it for the second reel to start.
Absolutely. 5 reels to be exact. If we're talking about anything 90 minutes plus, there would be about 5 reels, not too smaller than the one you see in the back here, a little bit bigger, but they would come in 5 reels. And yeah, a good projectionist, you almost have to put them on the same caliber as a good cinematographer or a good gaffer or a good sound guy. There's idiosyncrasies and technique and all these things to make these things. To make this, when you're switching from one reel to another, the idea is to keep the audience engaged in the story, right? And yeah, these guys, men and women, were really the backbone. They were the last slice of humanity behind the delivery of these images before it was just in the audience and you could, escape in your story. So yeah.
And so how did you actually come up with this idea and get your hands on some of these? And like, what was the idea behind preserving them and why put them in resin?
Sure. Well, a couple of things went right for us in order for us to just kind of land on this. You could almost call it luck, because everything good has to start with a conceptual idea, right? So, so it's like, okay, well, I've been in the motion picture industry since 2007. back then there was a major that was really the threshold of when film kind of lost its grip on the industry, and digital really started becoming you almost didn't even have to talk about it anymore. You were basically shooting on the digital camera. So that's 2007 all the way up till now. So I personally shot motion picture film. I know how to shoot it. It's something that you don't want to just do if you don't know what you're doing. And simply put, there's less of us out there. There's just less people out there that have actually worked with the medium. So because I knew that, and I knew where the industry was with everything, and then on top of it, the pandemic kind of accelerated a lot of things. Both it accelerated a lot of technologies like QR codes, things like that, but it also accelerated the extinction of a lot of technologies. And one of those technologies was film. Also being from my hometown, knowing the value of that, and just knowing a fair amount of people who worked at Kodak. And I visited Kodak when I was younger, and just the facilities and the infrastructure. So I had all of that to work with, to kind of also just to basically go, all of these big giant corporate buildings in Burbank and in Hollywood, these guys, they show up and they're wearing, nice clothing, and they're all sitting in board meetings. That they don't want this stuff. It's not part of their business model anymore. This stuff is basically just going to sit in a box, if it even is still around. And that's kind of where it started, man. And it really started because we were moving during the pandemic, and I came across my photochem boxes. Just like every person, and you can set your watch to this, they were in the closet or in the garage, the last box you could ever possibly find, dusty, gross. And I was like, okay, I think if I can get this stuff, I think people will value it. And we've kind of just never looked. We really just never looked back. It seems like it should have been something handled that just wasn't.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, so as far as the process of like putting these in the resin, like what is that like? Because I read somewhere that it takes you like 10 days per item.
You want to run them through? It depends. It's like give them like a typical, like, it's a cycle, right? You almost have to treat it like a batch of cookies, right?
Exactly.
And there's got to be like a proper way to handle it. You have to wear gloves, things like that.
We're totally doing that. We're cleaning them off. They smell like vinegar when we're going through them. So they're already decomposing. So we go through, and then the coolest thing is we're creating a storyboard each time we do a piece. Like, so that's the biggest question we get, is someone else going to have one that looks like mine? And the answer is no. And that's the best part, is you get to have 1 second or 2 seconds of the movie, and that's what you're on the hook for preserving. And it's really cool. It's that a community is what we're building, basically. And to get through it, we literally begin on Monday, a new cycle. We go create all our pieces, and it takes
the curation. She's talking, right, like she's saying, it's like, to curate these, every single one has its own format, and it's subject to the behavior of how the film was wound, how tight or untight it was wound on the foil.
Interesting.
Just some, there's all kinds of things that we're going through. And then they get into a situation where it's like time to cast. And then the casting process is the thing with our product is, it's not the film, it's not the resin, it's both. It's a symbiotic relationship. Because it's like, like I have a coiled piece of film here. It's just a piece of plastic. You can't really do much with this. It's designed to run through a machine. So when you get them in the resin is really where these things turn into a thing. He said, like, it takes about, worst case scenario, it's about a 10-day thing for one individual item. Humidity, all kinds of condition variables that factor into how long or how little it takes to do the curing. But yeah, I'd say between 7 to 10 days for just one item. So it's labor intensive, absolutely.
Wow. So basically these reels were sitting in a temperature controlled room, technically being preserved, but not enough. They weren't preserved like they are when they go into the resin.
Well, so that first part, like I explained this to my mom, like what we're doing, and I showed her. She's like, "Oh wow, they really opened up the archives for you." I think everyone thinks that this is Hollywood. They're responsible. They do everything by the book, and it's all right. No, they don't. A lot of these film prints are not being preserved properly. They're coiled up in some kind of heat-soaked container. They're just left there, and the air is just completely chewing on the ink. That's the biggest misconception, the instinctual thing to do with your film, whether it's the Kodak 1 hour photo stuff, or like if you're a filmmaker like yourself and me, you're putting these in dark places because it's like gonna keep it. It's the air, the nitrogen, the hydrogen in the air is completely manipulating the ink. And it doesn't matter if it's coiled, it's just getting in there. And will it do it today, tomorrow? No, but like today and tomorrow turns into 10 years like that. And that's the thing, is this stuff is just unaccounted for and abandoned.
Mhm.
So what we're doing is reconceptualizing film, and it opens up in a proper behavior of what we should be doing with these things.
And so when they start oxidizing, they start turning pink and then eventually red.
Yeah. So, okay, when you're talking about film processing, there was a number of different processes that were invented for film. One of them was Technicolor, one was Eastman printing, and then now we're into a contemporary setting. It's Vision stocks now. Like Kodak has a whole program called Vision.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very contemporary thing. That started in like late 90s, early 2000s. That they started off with Vision 2, a Vision into Vision 2, and we're now into Vision 3. These are all processes on how to basically chemically resolve your film to get the kind of image that you need.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is when you see fade on these prints, it was simply just to save money. So Eastman printing was the worst, but it was the cheapest. Again, like, and trust me, we're Hollywood people. I'm a filmmaker, I'm a storyteller, just like you through and through. But the industry has what almost every industry runs into. It's if it gets too top heavy, they want to save money wherever they can. So if you're a production company and you're like, so let me get this straight, I can print 400 prints of my movie for $30,000 printing this way. But if I print it this way, which is better, and it's going to cost me $60,000, well, what do I care if they don't run after their initial release? Because after 3 weeks of the movie being in the theater, who cares if it goes off print? I don't need it anymore. It's just handling my image just for the time that I need to do box office economics with. So a lot of money people started making decisions like that. Some money people, however, didn't. One of those money people was a guy named Walt Disney. Walt Disney figured out early on, he was like, Dr. Kelmis and this Technicolor process, it's the best. I mean, and my animations just look the best on it. And if you don't think he took all the processes and tested them all out, that's just the kind of guy he was. And he said, well, so if I'm doing animations, I'm only doing 1-for-1 takes. It's like I'm only going to animate this thing once, maybe twice tops. But if you're a movie like Gone with the Wind or Wizard of Oz and you're doing 15 takes, you can. I totally get how Technicolor could be a major pain in terms of stacking up the dollars, and you're printing all this stuff in Technicolor that no one's ever going to see.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Walt Disney actually had he didn't have the patent on it, but he had like the exclusive rights on Technicolor. I'm talking early days Snow White, and I believe if you were in town using Technicolor, you had to go and kind of ask. Okay, can we use this process? Can we borrow the machines that you're using? And so movies like Gone with the Wind, Snow White was on Technicolor, Wizard of Oz, and then it went from 3-strip Technicolor to 2-strip, because everything the whole way through, it's like, this looks great, but boy, was it expensive. And so it kind of became a race to the bottom. Eventually, right around the 60s into the 70s, you started getting Eastman printing. Now, Eastman printing was very economical. So if you're like a young Martin Scorsese and you're doing Taxi Driver and you're shooting in bathrooms without permits and you're trying to get out of there before the local mob comes and takes all your film cans from you, you're trying to shoot on the cheapest stuff possible, because everyone's just trying to, make plays and figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's why you see a lot of those films from the 60s and particularly the 70s where they just get very red. And they get red because they just, the printing of those was just more susceptible to the elements. So,
makes sense.
Yeah. So anyways, that's long-winded, but
no, it's so fascinating. I mean,
yeah.
I could talk about it for hours, but how far back are we talking here as far as the films you have? You have films all the way back to the early 1900s or what?
Yeah, our oldest film is from 1914 is Charlie Chaplin's The Property Man. It's our only nitrate film. It's really cool because obviously you have some, not the Chaplin, but you have other pieces where you can see the optical score on the left side here.
Mm-hmm.
That one is our silent film, so there's no sound wave photographed on there. So it's really cool to just see the difference. And that one aged and it has like this orange tint to it. So it's really cool to see the different way the elements is dissolving the film. And now that it's in the resin, like people can just see it and they're holding something that literally it was made 2 years after the Titanic sank. So when you sit with that, you're like, holy shit, this is like a relic. And I'm holding it. And I'm outside and I can hold it. It's not going to explode. It's really cool when people come to our booths and see this. They're like, I'm blown away with this ability to see this and have this conceptual concept.
A lot of people have never seen film. We have to take this into consideration. Mm-hmm. Most people have literally fell in love with movies. Whatever the movie is that is yours from you. However you got to see it, you saw it initially this way. You never got to see the delivery device of it. So when people, we sell these particularly on weekends heavy here in Los Angeles. When people come, we set things up and it's kind of like a mini museum, man. Like people are really just like that. And they're like, I'm like, dude, take your time. Like this, we're here to talk. This is a house of film. If you are a filmmaker and you're into film, you can stay. It's like that.
And tell me about the one I see in the background on the left. There's a bigger one. Is that IMAX?
Yeah, very good. So this is so we try to make a little bit of a visual aid thing here, but this is IMAX. This is obviously very popular right now. One of the reasons it's popular is because Oppenheimer really kind of brought it into the forefront. It has this is just one of the shots of the movie. But Interstellar. But to not talk too much about the movie, I feel like that's its own separate thing. But but the fact that this is an IMAX film, this is 35 millimeters, so you can just see the image size difference, and what that translates into is image quality. So that's why when you go see a movie in IMAX, it's just incredibly overwhelming. It's massive. They were initially not designed for motion pictures, by the way. It was more scientific and educational. But the problem with those cameras is they're loud, right? So I have a 335 right here, which is a workhorse of the 60s and 70s. Basically, this was the post-war design that the Germans made after World War II. It was this camera, and if you weren't shooting on this, you're most likely shooting on Panavision cameras. The French made some stuff. Either way,
Germans make great tripods too.
Man, do they make great gear?
Yeah.
Anyways, and that's neither here nor there. But yeah. So what really blew me away, particularly this year, was Oppenheimer IMAX, and then the billing for like Matt Damon and Emily Blunt. It was all like small. I was like, geez, the format of the film is the heavy hitter on this movie. Where it's usually like Harrison Ford, but is this in Air Force One? Tom Cruise, Top Gun. With Oppenheimer, it was like Oppenheimer is 70 mil, and by the way, we have these actors in there. So that to me was like kind of like, wow, like there's obviously something. I think the public is starting to have a proper understanding of what we've done. This with automobiles, we've done this with clothing, we've done this with posters, furniture. I think it's now time to start treating these films as what they are now, is real relics. So
yeah, I mean, just if you love history as much as I do and filmmaking, like I was immediately addicted.
But let me just say, man, it's really like I met you through a great guy. I want to shout him out, Tony Crow Audio.
Yeah.
And I know he's like, dude, I told my friend in Florida the thing, and then next thing you know, you're like, I want Alien. I mean, the prints that you really awesome.
Yeah,
So
I'm
I just
stoked, man.
At Jurassic Park.
I can't stress this enough though. Like it really is a participation of preservation. It's like if I know we like these things, I know what they're worth, but the fact that you understand that and you what you're saying when you get these from us is like you are able and willing to take that 1 second or those 2 seconds of this motion picture, and you're gonna make sure that it's gonna stick around. And so I'm thanking you, man. And people like my buddy Tony, and just like anyone who really understands that these are an investment. Film has not been treated like an investment for a very long time. It's always been a hindrance. It's expensive. 1,000-foot to fill this up with 1,000 foot of film costs $400 just for the film. It only lasts 12 minutes at 24 frames per second, which is real time, and that's not even including development, which is like 30 cents a foot. So it's like it's always been viewed. Film has always been viewed as this pain in the ass, and when can we figure out a technology that can get rid of it? So I think finally now the pendulum is turning to like, I think we need to kind of go easy on this stuff now and treat it like the way we treat our grandparents and our history. It's like, do we agree with it? Oh no, I mean, trust me, there's plenty of film out there, like horrible things, war. What have you, but there's also a lot of really cool things. So it's not the film's fault. That's the humanity part. That part I can't fix. But what I can do is take, Wizard of Oz prints from the 50s and get them out of looking like a hockey puck and actually make them palatable for people. So, families come and see our stuff. They got their kids there. They're talking to their kids. It's multi-generational. So anyways.
Yeah, there's so much history, not just like celebrating some of our favorite films, but these films were so real. There was no I've been on a Hitchcock marathon, and I just watched Rear Window, and it's like you don't even notice the cuts because they're so you know what I mean? It's just so it's the art too, like preserving the art of you're really like preserving the golden years too of Hollywood. It's just, and I don't know a better way to do it than what you guys are doing.
Same here. I mean, so thanks for letting me have these long-winded things, but you had a question earlier about like so now why resin, right? Why go that medium? Why not just take a picture frame and take a bunch of Scotch tape and put them on the glass, right? So it's like, the resin is the best preservative, right? So resin, it just gets the film out of the elements, but you can still see it. Mm-hmm. It's durable. It's basically the same material as bowling balls. So it's not brittle or green like glass. Resin's Achilles heel is it tints over time, but only gradually. But resin, like at anything, has come a long way with how it's refined and how it's made. So we literally deal with the best resin shops in town. These guys make resin essentially for archaeologists, the way archaeologists take this same resin and put fossils in them. So we're literally using museum grade materials. And then, like I said, after that, it's just we make them bottom heavy. So like this is a 2001 Space Odyssey, but we make them bottom heavy, so they can land on a coffee table and they're fine. And but you could also you can drill in them. They're kind of a Swiss Army knife. I always tell people, they're like, when you go to Home Depot and you see all the pre-made plywoods and the 2x4s, we're basically like, we're uncoiling the film, we're cleaning it, we're curating it, and we're making slabs of it. If you want to make a light box, if you want to put it at a window, that's on you. Go build your film museum. But like, we provide the service of getting it in the acrylic, and we stop there. Mm-hmm. I want to leave more on the table for filmmakers. Oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, dude. We welcome that. Mm-hmm. That's what we want.
Yeah, I mean, I like just made I don't want to say cheap. I mean, it looks good, but I just threw something together. It was like just two white boards, and then you put a light above it, and it really lights them up. And you mentioned you don't have to be too concerned about UV because there's some sort of UV protectant that you're working in?
Well, the modern day acrylics, particularly what we're using, have filtration of UV. They have it in there, so it's like the way you would add a UV filter to your front lens. But you look at it and you're like, it says UV, but it's clear. Shouldn't there be something? It's like, no, actually, this is actually absorbing that. And all ultraviolet is just a part of frequency of light. Just like infrared is over on this scale, the human eye can see this. This is all your red, green, blue, cyan, magentas, yellows, and then right over here is your red is your last frequency you can see before it turns into ultraviolet. And ultraviolet is what would get to it. However, like I said, with the acrylic that we're using, it's giving it legs. Everything eventually goes back to dust, right? What we're doing is giving these a warranty that was outside of their natural perishable expiration date. Not by years. We're talking like by a couple 100 years.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I love it so much. I haven't even like mentally been able to open this yet.
Oh, cool. Man.
Like I wasn't like, I just haven't gotten mentally to the right time. So I'll probably have to film me opening these just to show people what it's like to unwrap some of these, you know?
Well, dang, now I can't wait for you to see them.
I mean, like I'm
I'm
freaking out so much that I just haven't been able to do it yet. So
When a little spoiler, they came out really, really good. One of them, I was like, "Oh, this one came out. Maybe we shouldn't sell them this one." But no, it came out really good, man. So, and thank you for being patient with it. And
oh yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a huge Spielberg fan, and so last question is like, you guys have probably loved storytelling for a long time, probably your whole life. So was there a film at one point that that you were just like, wow, like this is absolutely incredible, that like really got you into it, whether it was in the theater at a certain age or...
See, when it comes to films, that's harder for me. It's really like, I remember growing up and with my parents working at Kodak and my grandparents, it was like, I remember getting my first camera and like being the one to always like shoot photos, and then like growing up and then moving to Florida and moving to different places and seeing that it wasn't that big of a deal to other people. So I was like, oh, this has always been something that's very like connective. So I believe for him, it was more movies wise. For me, it's always been like, just, I'm capturing a moment that's like frozen in time with this. And it's always been really dear to my heart. So that part for me has been really fun doing this. Whereas I'm learning more about cinema now more than ever in my life. So I think it's like a yin and a yang aspect of...
It's awesome hearing her talk about like Kubrick and stuff like that. It's just really cool, you know, and
yeah,
like David Lean movies, like Jesus, you know, it's like very academic type stuff. Yeah, she's right. I was a movie guy. My aunt Anita worked at Kodak. I got to go work with her or something. Remember back in the day before, like we live in a crazy world now, like you can't touch a thing. But I used to just be able to like take your kid to work day. And I'd go to Kodak and literally like, I'm talking assembly lines and ovens the size of buildings and just these assembly lines of just like Kodak parts and stuff. And she worked there and she was a photographer herself, but she always had movies around, and you know, VHSs were a big deal, as you know, back in the day. And that's how you saw most movies if you didn't go to the theater. But I did kind of all the above. You know, matinees were cheap, and sometimes you could do a double header on matinees. You know, a lot of people did stuff like that. Mm-hmm. For me, Star Wars, the early Star Warses really define what it is to be a movie, and it also is a perfect symbiotic relationship between the money people and the creative people. Everyone on this part did everything right, and everyone on this part did everything right. I'm not saying that there wasn't conflict during it or behind the scenes, whatever, but Star Wars to me is the most profound form of cinematic language you could possibly have. They nailed it. It was dazzling. It's still dazzling. Perfect casting, the music, the cinematography, obviously the special effects. Mm-hmm. it was a big deal for me when I was able to have an audience with Harrison Ford,
Mhm.
handing him 1 second of an original release print of New Hope, and watching him literally just sit there and really, you could just, he wasn't with me anymore. He was back.
Mhm.
We had a good 15 minutes of just talking about movie and just stuff, and it was like, okay, this program cuts through, because there's always a segregation issue when it comes to movie stars and the public. And I can't go out because I'm too famous. Well, then why'd you become so famous? All I want to do is be around famous people. Well, then why aren't you just become famous? It's always this thing. This program cuts straight through that. So it doesn't matter if you're Robert Zemeckis, who has a couple of our film resins, or you're just like some dude that's just like, hey man, this is like my favorite movie. Oh, is this Beavis and Butthead Do America? Well, that's your movie, man. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's
Yeah.
why we curate it. So yeah, I'd say Star Wars. And Star Wars always goes in and out of problems in terms of like, do you remember the Star Wars special, the Christmas special? I mean, it's
Yep.
always problems. Right now, it's in a slump, but I do think at the end of the day, that world, that story is so dazzling that they just got to get the right group together to nail it.
Now, because you've had a couple people stop by. I know you mentioned like Ben Affleck stopped by, was checking this out as well. So it's really cool that Harrison Ford was able to get something too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Ben Affleck's, first off, a great filmmaker. I mean, when you think of movies like Good Will Hunting, Argo,
Mhm.
The Town, like this, these guys, when they hit baseballs, they knock them out of the park.
Mhm.
I don't care what anyone says. Armageddon Before the Asteroid is a great movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but look, yeah, when movie stars see this stuff, I think they just get very nostalgic.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And I think they also know that it doesn't. All of the special effects and the airplanes and the catering and all the costumes and the makeup, unless it gets on this little inch of plastic and projected so of an audience can see it, and you have to do that 5 times a day for a month straight, and then after that you have to put it on VHS and have it in a Walmart so somebody could go get it. Unless you do those things, it doesn't matter if you had an 18-hour day. It doesn't matter. None of that matters if no one gets their eyes on it. It just doesn't matter. You just did you just wasted your time. I think that's
Yeah.
really what when you see the architecture of this stuff, it's almost a humbling thing. You're like, this is how this happened. We live in this world now, man. I mean, we just live in tablet world. You know what I mean? It doesn't have the same response to people. It doesn't hit as hard. This looks like a very vulnerable piece of plastic because it is a vulnerable piece of plastic.
Mhm.
So when you put it in the acrylic, it's like you can't destroy this stuff anymore.
It's awesome. Man, I constantly am looking at pictures of like we mentioned Star Wars, and I just think of the pictures of Lucas and Spielberg and Harrison, like, and they're all together working in this time where there was no like internet or distractions or any of that stuff. So that's what I live vicariously through, is like going back to those days. It's saying we have like a minute and a half left here till the Zoom expires. So
I can't thank you enough for opening up your platform to us, man.
oh man, I'm honored, honestly, and I can't wait to make it out there. Definitely be out there next year.
No, man, beer's on me. So
Cool.
see you, man. Thank you for having us.
I can't wait to hang out. Yeah.
Yeah, your doc looks really awesome, man. We had a conversation on the phone once. I think we need filmmakers like you that are doing that kind of content. We got to get away from private jets and champagne and just kind of get back to just some.
Honored, man. I'm honored. I mean, it's a miracle that any movie gets made. It's a miracle that this documentary got made with very little resources. So, and of course, as the artist, unfortunately, I only see what could be better. But I'm really excited to like abandon it and show it to people, and yeah, it'll be fun. So, thank you guys so much. This is awesome.
Appreciate you.
I'll talk to you guys again soon, and I might even be reaching out about to see if you have some more films.
You did say you just watch Rear Window.
Yeah, I know, because now now I want to know about Hitchcock and more Technicolor, because that, was a pivotal point in the industry at that time. Cool.
Next time we'll talk about that. I got some anecdotes, but cool, man. I appreciate
Awesome.
you.
Cheers, guys. So cool to hear more from Jesse and Michelle live. Hope you enjoyed watching and you learned some more. Go check them out and have a great day. Signing off for now.